My name is Denise. I am 38 years old, and right now I am sitting in my daughter's dorm room at MIT, watching her unpack boxes and arrange her new life. 4 years ago, if someone told me we would be here, I would have laughed and then cried. Because 4 years ago, the man I trusted most in this world nearly destroyed everything I had built for my daughter. That man was my husband, and the person who saved us was our 12-year-old little girl. Before I begin this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If stories about betrayal, courage, and unexpected heroes touch your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Trust me, you will want to hear how a child outsmarted a grown man who thought he could get away with everything. Let me take you back to where it all started, to the life I thought I had, the life I believed was real. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. Our house was a 2-story white colonial with a wooden fence wrapped around the front yard. I had planted roses along that fence the year after we moved in, and every spring I would spend hours tending to them, pruning the dead leaves, making sure they had enough water. Derek used to joke that I loved those roses more than I loved him. I would laugh and tell him that was not true, but sometimes I wondered if he was right. Those roses never lied to me. I had been an elementary school teacher for 15 years by then. I loved my job. There is something magical about watching a child's face light up when they finally understand something they have been struggling with. I would come home exhausted most days, but it was the good kind of exhausted, the kind that comes from doing something meaningful. Derek worked as a financial manager at a large insurance company downtown. He was good with numbers, always had been. When we first started dating back in college, he would help me with my accounting homework. I was terrible at math, and he would sit patiently beside me, explaining the same concept over and over until it finally clicked. I fell in love with his patience first, then everything else followed. We got married 14 years ago. The wedding was small, just family and close friends, held in my parents' backyard. I wore my mother's wedding dress altered to fit my slightly taller frame. Derek cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. I remember thinking that any man who cries at his own wedding must have a good heart. For years, I believed that. Our daughter Sophie came into the world 3 years after we got married. She was born on a rainy Tuesday in April, and from the moment I held her in my arms, I knew my life had changed forever. She was so small, so perfect with her father's dark hair and my green eyes. Derek stood beside my hospital bed, tears streaming down his face again, and he promised me that he would do anything to give this child the best life possible. I believed that too. Sophie was different from other children, and I do not mean that in a bad way. From a very young age, she showed a curiosity that went beyond normal childhood wonder. When she was 5, she took apart her electronic toy car to see how it worked inside. I found her sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by tiny screws and wires completely focused on the mechanism. She could not put it back together, but she understood how it worked. That was Sophie. She needed to know how things worked. By the time she was 10, she had taught herself basic programming through YouTube tutorials. She would spend hours in her room, typing away at her old laptop, creating simple games and animations. I did not understand any of it, but I could see the passion in her eyes. She told me one night that she wanted to go to MIT and become a software engineer. She wanted to build things that would change the world. I held her close and told her that if that was her dream, we would make it happen. The bond between Sophie and me was special. We talked about everything. She told me about her friends at school, about the boys she thought were annoying, about the teachers she liked, and the ones she did not. She asked me questions about life, about love, about why people did the things they did. Sometimes I had answers, sometimes I did not. But we always talked. Sophie had another quality that I did not fully appreciate until later. She was incredibly observant. She noticed things that other people missed. She could tell when someone was upset even if they were smiling. She could sense tension in a room before anyone spoke. I used to think this was just sensitivity, but I came to realize it was something more. It was a gift. When Sophie was just 1 year old, Derek and I sat down and made a decision that would shape our family's future. We decided to start saving for her college education. We knew how expensive universities were getting, and we did not want our daughter to start her adult life buried in student debt. We wanted to give her a clean start, a real chance at her dreams. So we opened a savings account specifically for Sophie's education. Every month, we each put in a fixed amount. Derek contributed more because he earned more, but I put in what I could from my teaching salary. In the early years, it was not much, but it added up over time. I made sacrifices to make those contributions. I stopped buying new clothes for myself. I skipped my annual spa day with my friends. I packed my lunch instead of buying food at school. When money was tight during the recession, I took on evening tutoring jobs to make sure we could still contribute to that account. I would come home at 9 o'clock at night, exhausted to my bones, but I would remind myself that it was for Sophie's future. Derek handled the account. He was the financial expert after all. He set up the automatic transfers, monitored the interest rates, moved the money into better performing funds when necessary. I trusted him completely with this. Why would I not? He was my husband. He was Sophie's father. He wanted the best for her just as much as I did. Or so I thought. By the time Sophie turned 12, we had accumulated nearly $120,000 in that account. $120,000. 12 years of sacrifice, 12 years of skipped vacations and second-hand furniture, and saying no to things we wanted, so we could say yes to our daughter's future. I remember the exact moment I found out how much we had saved. Derek showed me the statement one evening, and I actually started crying. Not sad tears, happy tears. We had done it. We had built a foundation for Sophie's dreams. I felt so proud of us of what we had accomplished together. That night, Sophie and I sat on the front porch of our house watching the fireflies dance across the lawn. She was telling me about MIT again, about the programs they had, about the research they were doing in artificial intelligence. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and I could see the woman she would become. I told her that her father and I had been saving for her education since she was a baby. I told her that no matter what happened, we would make sure she could go to whatever school she wanted. I told her that her dreams were our dreams too. She hugged me tight and said, "I know, Mom. I trust you." Those words stayed with me. What I did not know sitting there on that porch with my daughter in my arms was that the foundation I thought we had built was already crumbling. The man I trusted with our future was already betraying us. And the money I had sacrificed so much to save was already being spent on someone else. But I would not find that out for another 6 months. And when I did nothing, would ever be the same again. The changes started slowly, so slowly, that I almost missed them. It began about 6 months before everything fell apart. Derek started coming home later than usual. At first it was just an hour or two. He would walk through the door around 7:30 instead of 6, looking tired, saying he had a big project at work. I believed him. Financial managers often had busy seasons. I would warm up his dinner and sit with him while he ate, asking about his day, and he would give me vague answers about spreadsheets and client meetings. Then the late nights became more frequent. 7:30 became 8:30. 8:30 became 9. Some nights he would not come home until after 10, and I would already be in bed half asleep, listening to his footsteps on the stairs. He would slip into bed beside me, smelling like cologne he had not been wearing when he left that morning, and I would tell myself I was imagining things. He got a new phone around that time. His old one was perfectly fine, but he said his company was upgrading everyone. The new phone had a password that I did not know. His old phone never had a password. When I asked him what it was, he said it was a work security requirement and he was not supposed to share it. I did not push. Derek became irritable when I asked about work. He used to tell me everything, the office politics, the difficult clients, the projects he was proud of. Now, when I asked, he would snap at me, tell me he did not want to talk about work when he was home. He wanted to relax. I backed off thinking he was just stressed. He started going to the gym regularly. Derek had never been the gym type. In 14 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the number of times he had worked out. Now, he was going 3 or 4 times a week, coming home sweaty and energized. He started buying new clothes, 2 tighter shirts that showed off the muscles he was building, designer jeans that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I told myself these were good things. He was taking care of himself. He was trying to look good. Maybe it was a midlife crisis of sorts, the kind where men buy sports cars and get gym memberships. At least he was not buying a sports car. I was so blind. Sophie noticed things before I did. She always noticed things. One evening I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when Sophie came in, her face troubled. She told me she had seen something strange. She had walked past the study earlier that night and saw her father sitting in the dark texting someone. He was smiling at his phone, laughing quietly at something on the screen. I told her it was probably just a funny video from a coworker. She shook her head. She said it did not look like that. It looked like he was texting someone he really liked. I dismissed her concern. I told her not to worry that adults had work friends they texted sometimes. She did not seem convinced, but she dropped the subject. A few days later, Sophie mentioned that she had seen a strange name flash on her father's phone. The contact was saved as just the letter A with a heart emoji next to it. Derek had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went to the bathroom, and Sophie had glanced at it when a notification popped up. My stomach tightened, but I pushed the feeling down. A could be anyone, a coworker, a client, a friend from college. The heart emoji was probably just something Derek added as a joke. He had a weird sense of humor sometimes. I did not ask Derek about it. I did not want to seem like a jealous, suspicious wife. I trusted my husband. That was what good wives did. But Sophie did not stop paying attention. She started keeping a mental record of her father's strange behavior. She noticed when he took phone calls in the garage instead of the house. She noticed when he said he was going to the gym, but came back without having showered there like he usually did. She noticed when he started mentioning business trips that had never been part of his job before. She did not tell me about any of this at the time. She later explained that she did not want to upset me without being sure. She wanted to protect me from something that might not even be real. My 12-year-old daughter was trying to protect me. The financial warning signs came next. One afternoon, I checked the mailbox and found a letter from our bank. It was addressed to Derek, but it was about the savings account, the one we shared for Sophie's education. The letter informed us that our mailing address for that account had been changed, and if this was an error, we should contact the bank immediately. I showed Derek the letter that night. He glanced at it casually and explained that he had changed the mailing address to his work email. It was more convenient, he said. The paper statements were unnecessary now that everything was online. He would print out the statements for me whenever I wanted to see them. I accepted this explanation. It made sense. Derek was always finding ways to streamline our finances to make things more efficient. I trusted his judgment. A few weeks later, I asked him to show me the current balance of the account. We had talked about potentially putting some of the money into a higher yield investment, and I wanted to see where we stood. Derek said he would pull up the statement and print it for me. But he never did. Every time I reminded him, he had an excuse. He was too busy with work. He forgot. The printer was out of ink. He would do it over the weekend. Weekend after weekend passed, and I never saw that statement. A small, quiet voice in the back of my mind started whispering that something was wrong, but I did not listen to it. I had spent 14 years trusting this man. I could not just throw that trust away because of a few unanswered questions. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke up at 2 a.m. and reached across the bed for Derek. His side was empty and cold. He had not been there for a while. I got up quietly and walked downstairs, thinking maybe he could not sleep and was watching television. But the living room was dark. The kitchen was dark. The study was dark. Then I heard his voice. It was coming from the backyard. I crept to the sliding glass door and looked out. Derek was pacing on the patio, his phone pressed to his ear. The moonlight illuminated his face, and I could see that he was smiling. Not just smiling, glowing. I could not hear much through the glass, but I heard enough. He called the person on the other end. "Sweetheart." He told them he missed them. He told them he could not wait to see them again. My heart stopped. My lungs forgot how to breathe. My brain tried to process what I was hearing, tried to find an innocent explanation, tried to convince me that I was misunderstanding. I stood there in the darkness, frozen, as my husband told another person that he loved them. Then he laughed at something they said, and the sound of his laughter, the same laughter I had fallen in love with 20 years ago, cut through me like a knife. I backed away from the door slowly, carefully, not making a sound. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom and got back into bed. I pulled the covers over my head like a child hiding from a monster. When Derek came back to bed an hour later, I pretended to be asleep. He slid under the covers and fell asleep within minutes while I lay there wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions I was not ready to answer. I told myself I had misheard. I told myself there was an explanation. I told myself that my husband of 14 years would not do this to me, to our family, to our daughter. But deep down in the part of myself I was too afraid to listen to, I knew. Something had broken, and I was not sure it could ever be fixed. 2 weeks passed after that night. 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal while my mind churned with questions I was too scared to ask. Derek went on a business trip. 3 days in Chicago, he said. A conference for financial managers. He packed his suitcase and kissed me goodbye, and I smiled and told him to have a safe trip. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, Sophie came to find me. She told me her laptop was acting strange and asked if she could use her father's computer to finish a school project. I said yes without thinking. Derek never minded when Sophie used his things. He was always proud of how responsible she was. I did not know that this simple request would unravel everything. Sophie went into the study and opened Derek's laptop. He had not logged out of his email. His browser was still open, multiple tabs preserved from whatever he had been doing before he left. Sophie told me later that she was not planning to snoop. She just needed to open a new tab for her school research. But when she moved the cursor, she accidentally clicked on one of the open tabs. It was his email inbox. The first email she saw was from the bank. The subject line read, "Withdrawal confirmation from education savings account." Sophie's curiosity got the better of her. She clicked on the email and read the details. $12,000 had been withdrawn from the account 3 days earlier. Below that email was another one and another and another, each one confirming a withdrawal. $8,000, $15,000, $10,000, $20,000. Sophie scrolled through 6 months of withdrawal confirmations. In total, more than $80,000 had been taken from her college fund. Her hands were shaking as she searched through more emails. She found receipts from a luxury hotel in Miami, plane tickets for 2 passengers, a receipt from a jewelry store for a diamond bracelet, a receipt from a high-end handbag boutique. Then she found the emails from someone named Amber. The messages were intimate, romantic, filled with pet names and promises. Derek called Amber his future wife. Amber called Derek her real soulmate. They talked about the trips they had taken, the gifts he had given her, the life they were building together. Sophie sat in that study chair, her face wet with tears. She did not remember crying and realized that everything she believed about her family was a lie. She did not come to me right away. She told me later that she needed time to process, time to think, time to decide what to do. She was 12 years old, carrying a burden that would crush most adults. Instead of falling apart, my daughter started building a case. She used her technology skills to learn more about this woman who was destroying our family. She found Amber's LinkedIn profile. Amber worked at Derek's company as a marketing coordinator. She was 29 years old, blonde, beautiful in a polished artificial way. Sophie found Amber's Instagram account. It was full of photos of designer clothes, luxury vacations, expensive restaurants. Sophie noticed the timing of the posts and compared them to her father's business trips. They matched perfectly. Every time Derek was supposedly at a conference, Amber was posting photos from beach resorts or European cities. Sophie found a photo of Amber wearing a gold bracelet that matched the receipt from the jewelry store. She found a photo of Amber carrying a handbag that matched another receipt, all bought with money that was supposed to send Sophie to college. My daughter created a secret folder on her phone. She took screenshots of everything: the bank emails, the receipts, the romantic messages, Amber's Instagram posts. She organized them by date, creating a timeline of her father's betrayal. She was building evidence. While Sophie was conducting her investigation, I was conducting my own. The doubt that had been whispering in the back of my mind had grown into a scream. I could not ignore it anymore. I needed to see that savings account with my own eyes. I tried to log into the account online, but I did not have the password. I had never needed it before. Derek handled all of that. I called the bank and asked to reset the login credentials. The customer service representative told me that the email address on the account had been changed. They would need to verify my identity before making any changes. I went through a frustrating process of security questions, faxed documents, and verification calls. It took 3 days, but finally I had access. When I logged in and saw the balance, I thought there had been a mistake. $37,000. That was all that remained of the $120,000 we had saved. $83,000 had vanished. I clicked on the transaction history with trembling fingers. Withdrawal after withdrawal, transfer after transfer, all made over the past 6 months. Some of the money had been taken as cash. Some had been transferred to an account I did not recognize. I called Derek. I tried to keep my voice calm, tried not to accuse him of anything. Just asked him about the savings account. I said I had noticed some unusual activity and wanted to understand what was happening. He sounded annoyed. He said he had made some investments with that money. Investments that would grow significantly over time. He said he was going to surprise me with the returns. He said I should not worry and he would explain everything when he got home. I wanted to believe him. Part of me still desperately wanted to believe that my husband was not capable of what the evidence suggested. But the numbers did not lie. And neither did the fear in Derek's voice when I asked to see documentation of these investments. I hung up the phone and sat in the kitchen staring at nothing, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my husband was crumbling. That night I could not sleep. I sat in the living room in the dark, going over and over the facts in my mind, trying to find an innocent explanation that did not exist. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. She walked over to me and sat down. She did not say anything at first. She just took my hand and held it. Then she said the words that would change everything. "Mom, I know what's happening. I know about Dad and the money and the woman. I have proof, and I have a plan." I looked at my 12-year-old daughter, at the determination in her eyes, at the strength in her small shoulders, and I did not know whether to feel terrified or grateful. Maybe both. I asked her to show me what she had found. She handed me her phone. Sophie and I sat on the living room couch, her phone between us, as she walked me through everything she had discovered. She showed me the bank emails first. Each withdrawal confirmation felt like a punch to my stomach. 8,000 here, 15,000 there, 20,000 on a single day. The numbers blurred together into a nightmare of betrayal. Then she showed me the receipts. Hotel suites at $500 a night, first-class plane tickets to Miami, to Las Vegas, to the Bahamas, jewelry from stores I could not afford to walk into, handbags that cost more than my monthly salary. Finally, she showed me the emails between Derek and Amber. I only read a few before I had to stop. The intimacy of their words, the plans they were making, the way he called her his real love, made me physically sick. I closed my eyes and let the tears come. I had been holding them back for weeks, months maybe, and now I could not stop them. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the trust I had given so freely. I cried for my daughter who should not have had to carry this weight. Sophie held me while I sobbed. My 12-year-old daughter held me like I was the child. When my tears finally slowed, I asked her why she had not told me sooner. She said she wanted to be sure first. She did not want to hurt me with suspicions that might turn out to be wrong. She wanted proof, undeniable proof, before she brought this to me. I looked at her, this child I had raised, and saw someone I barely recognized. Not because she had changed, but because I had underestimated her. I had seen her as my little girl, someone to be protected. But she was so much more than that. I asked her what we should do now. She said she had been thinking about that. A lot. Her first instinct had been to confront her father directly, to show him the evidence and demand an explanation. But she had realized that would not work. Derek was smart. He would find a way to explain things away, to manipulate the situation, to make us doubt what we knew was true. Her second thought was to go to the police. But she was not sure if what he had done was actually illegal. He was on the account too. The money technically belonged to both of us. Could you steal from yourself? That was when Sophie said we needed to talk to someone who understood the law. The next morning, after Derek was safely at work, I called my sister Carol. Carol was 4 years younger than me, a family law attorney who had built a successful practice over the past decade. She was sharp, practical, and fiercely protective of the people she loved. When I told her I needed to talk to her about something urgent and private, she cleared her afternoon and drove straight to my house. Sophie and I showed her everything. Carol went through the evidence methodically, her lawyer brain cataloging every piece of information. When she finished, she sat back and let out a long breath. She told me that what Derek had done was complicated legally. The savings account was joint, which meant he technically had the right to withdraw money from it. But the fact that he had done so without my knowledge or consent, and had used the money for personal expenses with another woman, changed things. This could be considered dissipation of marital assets, especially if we were headed toward divorce. I asked her if we could get the money back. She said it was possible, but it would require legal action. We would need to file for divorce and request that the court order Derek to repay the dissipated assets. It would be a fight, but with the evidence Sophie had gathered, we had a strong case. Then Sophie spoke up. She said she did not just want the money back. She wanted her father to face consequences for what he had done. Not just legal consequences. She wanted his family to know. She wanted his parents, his relatives, everyone who thought he was a good man to see who he really was. Carol looked at Sophie with surprise and something like respect. Sophie explained her plan. Derek's mother, Patricia, was turning 70 in 2 weeks. The family was planning a big celebration at his parents' house with dozens of guests, including relatives, family friends, and former business associates of Derek's father, Richard. Everyone Derek cared about impressing would be in one room. Sophie wanted to expose him there. She would volunteer to run the memory slideshow, something families often did at milestone birthday parties. Old photos, nostalgic music, sentimental moments. But instead of memories, she would play her evidence. Screenshots of bank statements, receipts for gifts bought for another woman, messages proving his affair. She would let the truth play on a 70-inch television in front of everyone Derek wanted to deceive. I felt a chill run down my spine. The plan was ruthless. It was calculated. It was something I never would have thought of. I asked Sophie if she was sure about this. Once we did this, there was no going back. Her relationship with her father would be destroyed forever. Sophie looked at me with those green eyes, my eyes, and said something I will never forget. She said her relationship with her father was already destroyed. He had destroyed it when he stole her future to give to another woman. She was just making sure everyone else knew the truth. Carol was quiet for a moment. Then she said that from a strategic standpoint, the plan had merit. A public exposure would make it harder for Derek to spin the narrative. It would also put social pressure on him, which might make the legal proceedings smoother. His own family would become witnesses to his character. But she warned us that it would be ugly. Derek would be humiliated. His parents would be devastated. There was no predicting how he might react. I thought about Patricia, who had always been kind to me. I thought about Richard, who had welcomed me into his family like a daughter. They did not deserve to have their celebration ruined. But then I thought about Sophie, about 12 years of sacrifice, about $83,000 stolen to buy diamond bracelets for a 29-year-old marketing coordinator. I looked at my daughter and my sister. I said we should do it. Carol nodded. She said she would start preparing the divorce papers immediately. She wanted everything ready to file the moment the party ended. Sophie began working on her presentation, and I began the hardest 2 weeks of my life. Those 2 weeks were a special kind of torture. Every morning I woke up next to the man who had betrayed me and smiled at him. I made him coffee, I packed his lunch, I asked about his day and nodded sympathetically when he complained about work stress. I played the role of the loyal, trusting wife, even as every word out of his mouth made me want to scream. Derek came home late almost every night during those 2 weeks. He said it was because of a big project. I knew he was with her. I pictured them together laughing, touching spending money that should have been my daughter's. The images haunted me, but I could not let them show on my face. One night, Derek was feeling particularly affectionate. He wrapped his arms around me from behind while I was doing dishes and told me he loved me. He said I was the best thing that ever happened to him. He said he did not know what he would do without me. I said I love you too, and felt the words turn to ash in my mouth. Another night we were watching television together, and Derek reached over and held my hand. It was something he used to do all the time in the early years of our marriage, something he had stopped doing long ago. I wondered if he was feeling guilty. I wondered if some small part of him knew that his world was about to collapse. I let him hold my hand and counted the days until the party. The hardest moments were when Sophie was around. She was also playing her role as the innocent daughter who did not know anything was wrong. She sat at dinner with us chatting about school, laughing at her father's jokes, acting like everything was normal. But sometimes, I would catch her eye across the table and I would see the steel underneath her smile. She was counting down, too. At night, after Derek fell asleep, I would slip into Sophie's room. We would sit together in the dark, whispering about the plan, going over the details, making sure nothing could go wrong. Sophie had transferred all her evidence to a USB drive. She had tested it on multiple devices to make sure it would play correctly. She had timed the video to run for exactly 15 minutes, long enough to show everything, without giving Derek time to react. Carol was working behind the scenes. She had drafted the divorce petition and prepared motions to freeze our joint accounts the moment the papers were filed. She had also consulted with a colleague who specialized in asset recovery. He confirmed that we had a strong case for forcing Derek to repay the dissipated funds. During those 2 weeks, Sophie continued her investigation. She was relentless. Using skills I did not even know she had, she accessed the browsing history on our home network. She discovered that Derek had been looking at real estate in another city. Condominiums, 2 bedrooms. She found saved searches for neighborhoods near Amber's hometown. He was planning to leave us. The money from the college fund was not just funding an affair, it was funding a new life. A life without Sophie and me. Sophie also discovered that Derek had accumulated nearly $50,000 in credit card debt over the past year. All of it spent on things that never came home to us: hotels, restaurants, jewelry, trips. He was drowning in debt, and he had stolen from his own daughter to stay afloat. Each new discovery hardened my resolve. Whatever guilt I had felt about exposing Derek in front of his family melted away. He had made his choices. Now he would face the consequences. The night before the party, Denise and Sophie sat together in Sophie's room. The USB drive sat on the desk between them, small and ordinary looking, containing the end of a marriage. Sophie asked me if I was ready. I told her I did not know if anyone could ever be ready for something like this. She asked me if I was scared. I said yes. I was terrified. Of what tomorrow would bring, of how Derek would react, of the look on his parents' faces when they learned the truth about their son. Then Sophie said something that gave me strength. She said that she was scared too. But she was more scared of doing nothing. She was more scared of letting him get away with it. She was more scared of a future where men like her father could destroy their families and never face any consequences. I looked at my daughter, this 12-year-old girl, who had been forced to grow up too fast, and I made her a promise. I promised that no matter what happened tomorrow, I would stand with her. I would not back down. I would not let her down. She hugged me tight and said she knew. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. Tomorrow would change everything, but we were ready. Patricia's 70th birthday party was held at the family home, a sprawling ranch house on 5 acres of land outside the city. Richard had built that house 40 years ago, and every room held memories of family gatherings, holiday dinners, and celebrations just like this one. 40 guests filled the living room and spilled onto the back patio: aunts and uncles, cousins, family friends who had known Richard and Patricia for decades, former business associates who still respected Richard's legacy in the community, and Derek, standing in the center of it all, playing the role of devoted son. He had his arm around me when we arrived, introducing me to distant relatives I had met a dozen times before acting like we were the perfect couple. He kissed his mother on the cheek and told her she looked beautiful. He shook his father's hand and called him sir, the way he always did. He was performing, and he was very, very good at it. Sophie stayed close to me throughout the evening. She was quiet, polite, helping her grandmother arrange flowers and offering drinks to guests. No one would have guessed that she was counting the minutes until the slideshow. The party progressed through dinner, through toasts, through Patricia opening presents and tearing up at the thoughtful gifts from her family. Derek gave her an expensive silk scarf, probably bought with money from our daughter's college fund, and Patricia hugged him and called him her sweet boy. I watched and said nothing. Finally, after dessert, Richard announced that it was time for the memory slideshow. The tradition at these milestone birthdays was to show old photos and videos to reminisce about the past and celebrate the person's life. Sophie raised her hand and volunteered to run the presentation. She said she had prepared something special for her grandmother, a collection of memories that she had put together herself. Patricia beamed with pride. Richard clapped his granddaughter on the shoulder. Derek smiled approvingly, completely unaware. Sophie walked to the large television mounted on the wall. She had the USB drive in her pocket. Her hands were steady as she connected it to the television's USB port. I positioned myself near the door. Carol had advised me to be ready to leave quickly if things became volatile. Sophie picked up the remote control. She looked at me across the room. I gave her a small nod. The screen lit up. The first image appeared with a title card: "A story our family needs to hear." The room fell silent. People looked at each other in confusion. This was not what they expected from a birthday slideshow. Derek laughed nervously and asked Sophie what this was. Sophie did not answer. She pressed play. The next screen showed a screenshot of a bank statement. The account was labeled Sophie's College Education Fund. The balance showed over $100,000. Then a series of withdrawal notifications appeared one after another, dated over the past 6 months. 8,000, 12,000, 20,000. The amounts kept coming, the total climbing higher and higher. The room was dead silent. Derek stood up, his face pale, asking what was going on, demanding that someone turn this off. Nobody moved. The video continued. Receipts from luxury hotels. First-class airline tickets for 2 passengers. Derek's name and another name, Amber, clearly visible. A receipt from a jewelry store for a diamond bracelet. A receipt from a designer handbag boutique. Then the emails appeared on screen. Romantic messages between Derek and Amber. Pet names, promises, plans for a future together. The words "I love you" exchanged between a married man and his mistress paid for with his daughter's dreams. Derek rushed toward the television, trying to grab the remote from Sophie, but Sophie had already hidden it. She stepped back calm and let the video play. Photos from Amber's Instagram appeared next. The diamond bracelet on her wrist, the designer bag on her shoulder. Vacation photos from Miami, from Las Vegas, from the Bahamas, all dated to match Derek's business trips. Richard stood up from his chair, his face red with fury. He demanded to know if this was true. He demanded that Derek explain himself. Derek was babbling now, saying it was a misunderstanding, saying the evidence had been manipulated, saying Sophie had made this all up because she was angry about something. I stood up and spoke for the first time. I said that everything in that video was real. I said that my husband had stolen nearly $90,000 from our daughter's college fund to spend on his mistress. I said that I had confirmed the bank records myself. I said that Sophie had discovered the truth because Derek was too careless to cover his tracks. Patricia was crying. She asked Derek how he could do this. She asked how he could steal from his own child. Derek turned to me with hatred in his eyes. He said I had destroyed our family. He said I had ruined everything. Sophie stepped forward. Her voice was steady and clear as she spoke. She said that he was wrong. She said he had destroyed the family when he chose his mistress over his wife and daughter. She said he had ruined everything when he stole her future to buy jewelry for another woman. She said she had just made sure everyone knew the truth. The room erupted. Relatives were shouting questions. Friends were backing away, embarrassed to be witnessing this. Richard grabbed Derek by the arm and demanded answers. Patricia collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Derek looked around the room at the faces of everyone he had tried to deceive. His parents, his aunts and uncles, his father's respected colleagues. All of them now knew who he really was. He had no more lies left. Without another word, he pushed past the crowd and walked out the front door. A moment later, we heard his car start and speed away down the driveway. Carol appeared at my side. She had been waiting in the kitchen, ready for this moment. She handed me a pen and a folder containing the divorce papers. I signed my name without hesitation. My marriage was over. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Patricia came over to me, still crying. She took my hands and apologized over and over. She said she had no idea. She said she was ashamed of her son. She said she loved Sophie and me, and nothing Derek had done would change that. Richard stood behind his wife, his face set in hard lines. He told me that Derek would face consequences. He said he would personally ensure that Derek repaid every cent he had stolen. He said no grandson of his would be allowed to destroy his family without answering for it. Sophie stood beside me, her hand in mine. She had done what she set out to do. She had exposed the truth. She had protected her mother. She was 12 years old and she had saved us both. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life, but they were also months of healing. The divorce was finalized 4 months after the party. With Carol's help and the evidence Sophie had gathered, the court ordered Derek to repay the full amount he had taken from the college fund. He had to sell the condominium he had secretly purchased in another city to cover the debt. He also had to pay spousal support and child support, which he resented but could not avoid. Derek lost his job shortly after the party. Word had spread through his company about what he had done. Richard still had connections in the business community, and he made sure everyone knew the kind of man Derek really was. No reputable firm would hire him after that. Amber left him within weeks of the exposure. It turned out she was only interested in what Derek could give her. When the gifts stopped and the money dried up, so did her affection. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved to another state and never looked back. Derek tried to contact Sophie a few times in the months after the divorce. He sent her messages apologizing, trying to explain, asking for another chance. Sophie never responded. She told me that she had nothing to say to him. He had made his choice. And so had she. For me, healing was a slow process. I started seeing a therapist a few weeks after the divorce papers were signed. I needed help processing the betrayal, the anger, the grief for the marriage I thought I had. My therapist helped me understand that what happened was not my fault, that I had done nothing wrong, that trusting your husband was not a weakness. Some nights I still cried. Some mornings I still woke up feeling empty. But gradually, day by day, the pain became less sharp. The wounds began to close. My mother moved in with us for a few months. She had been widowed 5 years earlier, and she was happy to have a purpose. She cooked meals, helped with housework, and sat with me on the porch in the evenings while I processed everything that had happened. Her presence was a comfort I did not know I needed. My colleagues at school rallied around me. They brought me casseroles and flowers. They covered my classes when I needed mental health days. They reminded me that I was valued, that I was part of a community that cared about me. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the same self I had been before, but a new version. Stronger, wiser, more aware of my own worth. Sophie also went through her own healing process. She started seeing a therapist who specialized in children affected by family trauma. The therapist helped her process the complicated feelings she had about her father, the betrayal she had witnessed, the role she had played in exposing him. I worried sometimes that Sophie had been forced to grow up too fast, that carrying the burden of evidence and executing the plan had stolen something from her childhood. But her therapist assured me that Sophie was resilient. She was processing her experiences in a healthy way. She would be okay. And she was more than okay. She thrived. Sophie threw herself into her studies with renewed determination. Her grades, already excellent, became exceptional. She joined the robotics club and led her team to a regional championship. She started learning new programming languages, building more complex applications, dreaming bigger dreams. The college fund was restored and continued to grow. Richard and Patricia contributed to it as a way of making amends for their son's actions. They remained close to Sophie and me, refusing to let Derek's betrayal destroy our relationship with them. 4 years passed. 4 years of healing, growing, rebuilding. And now, here I am, sitting in Sophie's dorm room at MIT. She got in. Not just got in, but earned a partial scholarship based on her academic achievements and her robotics work. The admissions committee was particularly impressed by a software project she had developed in her junior year of high school, a program that helps domestic abuse survivors document evidence of their situations safely and securely. She said the idea came from personal experience. She said she wanted to help other people the way she had helped me. I watched her arranging her books on her desk, hanging posters on her wall, making this small room into her new home. She looked happy, excited, ready for whatever came next. She caught me staring and asked what I was thinking. I told her I was thinking about how proud I was of her, how grateful I was for her, how amazed I was by the person she had become. She walked over and sat beside me on the bed. She said she could not have done any of it without me. She said I had taught her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never accept being treated as less than she deserved. I told her she had taught me those things too. I told her that watching her courage during the darkest time of our lives had inspired me to find my own. We sat together in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Sophie said something that brought tears to my eyes. She said she did not regret what she had done 4 years ago. She did not regret exposing her father, even though it meant losing him forever. But she did have one regret. I asked her what it was. She said she regretted that I had been hurt. She wished she could have protected me from the pain of discovering the truth. She wished there had been a way to fix everything without me having to suffer. I held my daughter close and told her the truth. I told her that the pain was worth it, that discovering the truth, as devastating as it was, had set me free. I had spent years in a marriage built on lies, and I had not even known it. Sophie had given me the gift of clarity, even though it came wrapped in heartbreak. I told her that sometimes the people who save us are not the ones we expect. Sometimes our heroes are small and young and brave beyond their years. Sometimes a 12-year-old girl can see more clearly than the adults around her. Sophie smiled and wiped her eyes. I thought about Derek sometimes. Not with hatred anymore, not with anger, just with a kind of distant sadness for the man he could have been, the father he could have been, if he had made different choices. I had forgiven him not because he deserved it, but because carrying that anger was too heavy a burden to bear. I was free now, free of him, free of the lies, free of the life that was never really mine. And my daughter was starting her future. The future she had always dreamed of, the future I had promised her when she was small. Sophie asked if I was going to be okay driving home alone. I told her I would be fine. Better than fine. I stood up and looked around the dorm room one more time. This tiny space held so much promise, so much possibility. I hugged Sophie tightly, told her I loved her, and walked out the door. As I drove away from the MIT campus, I thought about everything we had been through: the betrayal, the discovery, the exposure, the divorce, the healing. And I realized something important. We do not always get to choose the challenges life throws at us. We do not get to decide when we will be betrayed, or hurt, or disappointed by the people we trust most. But we do get to choose how we respond. We can let the pain define us, or we can let it refine us. We can become bitter, or we can become better. We can stay trapped in the story of what was done to us, or we can write a new story about who we choose to become. Sophie had taught me that. My 12-year-old daughter, with her quick mind and her brave heart, had shown me what courage really looked like. It did not look like grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. It looked like a quiet determination to do what was right, even when it was hard. It looked like protecting the people you loved, even when it meant facing uncomfortable truths. It looked like a little girl refusing to let her father's choices destroy her mother's life. I smiled as the highway stretched out before me, carrying me toward home. The future was uncertain, it always is, but for the first time in years, I was not afraid of it, because I knew that whatever came next, I was strong enough to face it. Sophie had shown me that, and I knew that the bond between my daughter and me, forged in the fire of betrayal and tempered by the work of healing, was unbreakable. That was the real victory. Not the money recovered or the justice served. The real victory was us together, still standing, still loving each other, still believing in tomorrow. That is my story. If you have made it this far, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been surprised by someone you underestimated? Have you ever seen strength in someone you expected to be weak? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, please share it with them. You never know who might be going through their own battle right now. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening to my story and Sophie's story. May you find the courage to face your own challenges, and may you never underestimate the heroes who might be standing right beside you. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next story.